Hitler's secret projects. Secret weapons of the Third Reich. Overview of superweapon projects of the Third Reich. Both crazy and fantastic as well as real. Almost realized, from lasers, super tanks, and sonic cannons to a Nazi orbital station with a solar mirror sizzling cities. Secret weapons of the Third Reich. In this post, I offer a look at examples of Third Reich weapons as well as projects of such weapons. Look at how sophisticatedly the thought of Nazi scientists and engineers worked in inventing new ways to destroy and enslave humanity. If the Nazis had managed to improve and streamline any of the following, the course of history would have gone in a completely different direction. And perhaps you and I would not be now sitting in front of a computer, but standing at a machine tool in some Nazi factory as a free labor force, giving our whole life without a trace in the name of prosperity of the great German Empire. Subterranean boat. SUBTERRINA, a project of a real underground cruiser called the Serpent of Midgard, which remained a project. The idea of the German engineer Ritter, the author of the project, was this: a train capable of moving underwater, on the ground, and underground. Its main purpose was to detect and destroy secret underground bunkers of the enemy, to lay mines under fortifications, and to land troops in the enemy's rear by drilling through the earth's strata. The length of such an underground train was 7 m. The number of carriages varied depending on the assigned task and could have been several dozens. The project suggested having a camp kitchen, something like a dining car, periscopes, a radio station, repair shops, and sleeping quarters for the staff. Air was to be stored in compressed air tanks. Of course, a large number of weapons and mines. Estimated speed of this subterranean through the soft ground was 10 km. Through solid rocks, 2 km/h. On the ground, 30 km/h. The project dated 1934. In 1935, it was reviewed by German military experts who made several critical comments. Their resolution was, lack of sufficient calculation data. It seems that Ritter sucked his idea out of his hand without bothering himself with serious scientific calculations. But another German engineer, von Werner, calculated everything more accurately. Accordingly, his underground boat project looks more modest, but at least remotely realistic. Sea Lion, Engineer von Werner's underground submarine. Engineer Horner von Werner patented his project under the name Sea Lion in 1933. The submarine had to secretly reach enemy shores first by going underwater and then by drilling under the ground to put bombs under enemy's military objects or plant saboteurs. For 10 years, the project was gathering dust in the archive. However, with the coming of the war, the fascists began to consider all interesting ideas for new weapons. So the turn came to the Sea Lion. Specifications: length 25 m, crew 5 men, tardy speed underground, sieve underground, sieve underground, sieve underground, warhead 300 g of explosives. Trebelev's Underground Railroad. Not at all. After the war, the Soviet Union picked up the baton, which, among other trophies, received the Sea Lion drawings, on the basis of which the Soviet engineer Trebelev designed the underpass. This Podzemokod was actually built and tested somewhere in the Urals in the post-war years. But it is no longer a secret weapon of the Nazis, so its description is beyond the scope of this post. I will give only a photo from Wikipedia. As for the Nazi weapons, after considering a number of ridiculous and fantastic projects, I suggest that we dignify the attention with at least one successful one, the W rocket. W rockets, Hitler's weapon of retaliation. V is the German name for the letter V, the first letter of the word Vergeltungswaffe, weapon of retaliation. The chief designer was the father of the German rocket industry, Werner von Braun. The most successful rocket developments of the Nazis were the V1 and V2 rockets, which were used mainly for strikes against London. V1 cruise missile, a cruise missile or unmanned projectile airplane. Length 8.32 m, maximum speed up to 800 km, maximum flight altitude 2700 m, weight 2700 m, weight 2150 kg, range 270 km. It was launched by 45-meter catapult or from bomber. The first operational use of V1 took place on June 13, 1944, when 15 such missiles were launched on London. In total, nearly 10,000 V1s were fired on England, of which only 2,500 reached the target. About 5,000 were shot down by the British Air Defence Force, and 2,000 or more crashed into the sea due to engine failure. Since the aiming of the V-1 was very approximate, a manned version of the cruise missile with a small cabin for the pilot in front of the engine was developed but never used. After launching from a bomber, the pilot had to direct the missile to the enemy plane, for example, and at the last moment jump out with a parachute. Or not to jump out. 200 kamikaze pilots were trained to destroy British military installations, but they had to be used with the planes because the V-1 had been discontinued by that time. The V-2 ballistic missile. Height 14 m, weight with fuel 13.5 tons, maximum flight altitude 188 km, speed 6,180, 8 km, range 360 km, 160 km flight altitude. It is not a misprint. Although they reached an altitude of about 80 km when the V-2 was launched on London, 188 km is the record altitude reached during the tests. That is, the V-2 rocket is officially the first man-made object in history to make a suborbital spaceflight. All post-war rocket and space development in the United States departed from it, since the Americans employed Professor von Braun, unemployed after Hitler's death at NASA. The V-2 was launched from a stationary or mobile launch platform. Fuel, liquid oxygen, and ethyl alcohol was 9 tons of its 13 launch mass, which burned out during the first minute of flight, lifting the rocket to an altitude of 80 km and giving it a speed of 1,700 Mach. Further, the rocket flew by inertia, which was enough for more than 300 km. On September 8, 1944, the first operational launch of V-2 took place. The target, London. Such a fast missile British air defense capabilities could not intercept. By the way, they easily dealt with VOW. 1. British ace pilots could fly up to the cruise missile at the same speed and topple the mini-self into the sea by picking up its wing from below. Obviously, such trick would not work with the FOW. 2. But the V-2 exploded extremely amicably. Out of more than 4,000 V-2s launched during the whole period of time, almost half of them self-destructed, exploded at the start or already in flight. This type of Hitler's weapon of vengeance proved to be very ineffective. The accuracy of hitting the target of these rockets was plus or minus 10 km, and launching of 2,000 V-2 from September 44 to March 45 led to the death of only 2,700 people. That is, one huge 13-ton ballistic rocket killed 1 or 2 people. You should agree, it is very irrational, especially as one V-2 cost as much as 100 V-1. So this weapon played more of a psychological than a practical role in World War. Nazi Germany's Adolf Hitler space station. Adolf Hitler. This idea looks more like the plots of villains from modern comic book movies than a real project. But the leadership of Nazi Germany discussed it quite seriously. Of course, it was clear that it was a very expensive program, so it would take 50 years to implement. Naturally, it was assumed that Germany would win World War I, and then it would need a powerful argument to keep the whole world in fear. What could be scarier than a punishing ray of fire striking the unruly straight from heaven? That was the plan, to build a space orbital station with a huge mirror with an area of 3 kg, reflecting the sunbeam to a point on the surface of the Earth. According to calculations, the energy of such a beam would even be enough to melt armored vehicles in a given area. All this, of course, looks like science fiction. But the Nazi Germany of the war years had all the prerequisites for the rapid development of the space industry in the following years. The fact of V-2 rockets entering outer space really took place. There is even an unproven assumption that the first astronaut was not Yuri Gagarin, but a German test pilot who made a suborbital spaceflight aboard the V-10 rocket. The truth died in the process. That is, if the Germans won the war, they would have had a few decades to develop launch vehicles capable of placing cargo into orbit and create an orbital station. As for the huge mirror sending lethal sunbeams to Earth, it is difficult to judge how realistic this project is. One thing is certain, if not a mega mirror, then something no less lethal they would definitely come up with. Perhaps it would be a powerful laser or some other hyperboloid of Engineer Garin. But the unruly power of Führer would be in trouble for sure. Naturally, this project remained at the idea stage. Now, if you look at it from the height of the technical level of modern civilization, it seems on the one hand naive. But it could have happened. Hitler's main mistake. Throughout the war, Hitler was looking for a single and mighty super weapon, the weapon of vengeance that would dot all the I's in World War II. All the examples described in this post are failed attempts to create one. As you can see, in their search, the Nazis went through many options, and among them was another one, discarded as unpromising: nuclear weapons. It was the German physicist Otto Hahn who in 1939 discovered the fission of the atomic nucleus, which released enormous energy. After this discovery, the development of nuclear weapons began not only in Germany, but also in America and the Soviet Union. The development of the atomic bomb in Germany is a separate big topic. Here I'll just say that Hitler saw no prospects in this direction, and perhaps it was his main strategic miscalculation. He was more fond of the idea of ballistic missiles, on the development of which he directed all the forces of the military industry. The work on the atomic bomb was poorly financed, and by the end of the war, although it had some success, it was stopped altogether. And in conclusion, the most terrible weapon of the Nazis, this rifle, allowed the Wehrmacht soldiers to shoot without looking out of the trench or even around the corner. What a brilliant idea! They could hit the enemy and still be safe. For some reason, such a rifle was not widespread, perhaps because of Hitler's notorious short-sightedness. Like it, subscribe to our channel, comment. Many more interesting top films are waiting for you. Enjoy watching.